having a great day. It's January 10th, and I say we now have a journey within to go on, and we've got to go there with ourselves and others too, who believe in the power of now, the newly ordered world, which is what we have a chance to create on January 29th. The kings and queens will rally at the Queen's Park in Toronto, and I invite you to come along for the experience as we write the script we want to play in the next act. And I do say that we must choose. What's happening, Michael Holst? Michael Van Holst is in the waiting room. I do apologize. How are you, Michael? It's great to be with you. I do apologize. You've been waiting for a while, maybe. I was going live on YouTube and Facebook too. So if you don't unmute, then I think I don't got much right now to say, and so I say to all who tuned in today that it's time to play. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Hello, I am
fine. Amazing. Thank you for joining me, and apologies for leaving you in the waiting room for a little while there.
It's okay.
I appreciate your showing up tonight, and I was just singing the intro for the first podcast with the Journey Within, or the Kingdom Within podcast, and so it is officially the launch of that experience, and so I am your host, Laura J, here to play and say a few things along with others who have really awesome perspectives as well. And Michael Van Holst has quite the story and quite the journey and adventure that he's been on as he reclaimed who he is as a man standing for what he believes in. And he's got lots of experiences he could share, as we all do. And so it's really important for us to be clear about the intention of the meeting so that we can really get the most out of our time together. So we are streaming on Facebook and we are streaming on YouTube too. And what I want is for this hour every Monday night at 8 o'clock to be when we actually go within and to reflect on all of those places that we've been to bring us where we are now in this newly ordered world that we have a chance to create in a future now moment now. So we're going to recreate and transform ourselves and our self-image, which is how we transform ourselves. And we're doing it with the special practice. So that's what I wanted to share as part of the Peaceful Inner Warriors United Initiative, to really help warriors, help ones who are willing to stand for what they believe in, to know how to do it with proper standing, to understand how to actually get legs in print, and to be able to be a man or woman standing instead of a status. And the special practice is the sacred sojourn of the soul, which is the hero's journey from a soulful perspective. And then we've got physiology for movement. There's emotional awareness, because we need to understand how to deal with the emotions that show up. The L in the peaceful formula is love what arises and let go of your attachment to the not now. It's like all time is happening right now. We've got to be where we are, which is why the A in special is for alignment with the moment. The I is for intuition, to know how your soul speaks to you, the unique language that your soul has. And then leadership is the L, which really starts the whole special practice, because we have to know how to lead ourselves in order to be able to lead others. And we have to be willing to do that which we're calling others to do for us. There is no savior coming. I believe that we are the players on the field. I do believe that we need to actually foster the relationship we have with the guru within. And so that's really what we're going to be doing on Monday nights. And I encourage you to join in where we can have conversations. So it's not the whole time of me sharing my BS, which are my belief systems, but for me to share some of my beliefs and then also have others be able to share some of theirs so that we can really come together in common unity, which is what community is meant to be, and to rebuild that, which is why next Sunday, on the 16th of January at 2 p.m. until around 4 p.m., I'm suspecting, we're actually going to gather for peer support on the pier in Port Dover. And so that experience is going to be in person or in flesh. Whoever wants to show up, I'll be there. And I know a few others that are going to too. And it's really cool players of the game that are going to come out, characters. And we have to understand we are playing roles. That's why in court or at school, they do a roll call. Like, they're calling for your role. Are you playing? Are you going to be your person today, or are you going to stand as a man or a woman? These are the things that I really want to help people understand, so that when they ask that in court, you don't think they're saying, do you comprehend? You're saying, do you stand under my jurisdiction? And juris means by law, and diction is what we speak. So no, when they ask, do you stand under my jurisdiction? You say, I am a woman standing under my own jurisdiction in my own capacity. So, Michael, what do you think about all of that?
Well, I think those are really important thoughts to consider in this time when our rights are certainly being challenged. So there's a lot going on, particularly in our jurisdiction, if you will, of Ontario. Mm-hmm. And we need to ask about those things and test them when those new rules are made up. Or is that a legitimate rule? Are people making the kinds of decisions that they have the authority to make? And it's important that we find that out. And that doesn't have to be an angry discussion, mm-hmm. but it needs to be a discussion. Mm-hmm. I like the literalism of your peer support.
Yeah,
right? That sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
Although it sounds like it could be quite cold too.
Yes.
But so it may not be for the faint of heart.
That is true.
A good adventure.
It's going to potentially be very cold, just like it was today. I was at the Nathan Phillips Square gathering, and we went to 3 different locations, and there were some speeches that were presented. And Riel, it's great to have you here as well.
Yeah, my camera just started working.
Yeah, it did. I could see you, so I knew you were there. So it's absolutely awesome to have you here with us again tonight. And this was actually the first time all day I've taken off my vest because it was so cold. -10, 15, I heard. Like, it was cold. My feet were frozen. And then I thought, and I said to some women that were in the bathroom with us, imagine what it would have been like to be in the last war, because this one is the silent war. Like, it's already underway. We're in it. We're soldiers or we're warriors. Like, we either get paid to take orders, or we know what we stand for, we know what we're fighting for, and we know what we won't fight for, which is when we move our inner prostitute into its sacred side, which is one of the 4 survival archetypes that have a scared side, which makes very irresponsible decisions. Or we have the one that those same aspects of ourselves that stand in their sacred side. And when we're standing in our sacred side, then we're actually standing in our power, which is why Sacred Sojourn of the Soul. It's about remembering that the moment is sacred. It's about reordering the creative energies so that we are actually in the present now moment, instead of giving other people or ideas our power, and really coming back into this moment when we're all together. So it was pretty powerful earlier today, and it was very cold. And I was saying to these other women that were in the bathroom getting themselves a little warm before we started walking, I said, imagine what it would have been like back when our ancestors were fighting in the last wars, where it was cold like this, and they didn't have little bathrooms where they could go get warm in before we went for a walk and tried to have our voices be heard. Like, they were in the trenches with like bullets being shot at them and all kinds of physical threats coming at them, and like they didn't have a chance to get their feet warm, and that was their war, and now ours is different. Like ours is actually on our biology. Like I happened to put this shirt on this morning because it was in my bag that I stayed at my friend's place at last night so I could be near for the gathering today in Toronto. And it's a great way to knock off multiple birds at one stone, which is the pun, which probably isn't really a great one, but in terms of the death that's involved. But I guess it's befitting the death cult that we're currently experiencing the threat from, when the Nazis went underground, subvert with their messaging, right? And all of these things are happening on the outside, and there are threats that are being imposed upon the internal and our general organism of us, which is why the P is so important. It's physiology. We have to move. If we're going to actually, like, we have to be willing to move and ebb and flow with the moment. And that's part of what being present is, isn't it? It could be a literal question if anybody had an answer. And if not, that's cool too. We've got Michael joining in as well. It's awesome to have you here, Michael. Thank you for joining in. And the conversation is meant to be exactly that. It's really to give ourselves a platform to be able to come together so we can talk about the sacred in a safe space, so that we can really call ourselves back to the present now moment and create that rabbit hole that Maxwell Maltz talked about in Psychocybernetics, which is a phenomenal read. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend at least listening to the audio program if you have a chance. And in fact, I was talking about that book and fat rat syndrome, which is a disorder that I've had for quite some time that I would share with you, because fat rat syndrome is essentially where Maxwell Maltz, I had the realization when I was driving through the English countryside back a few years ago, and I was listening to this audio program while I was driving, and it was talking about two rats that were, one was starved and one was fed before then being put into a maze. And so the one that was fed kind of sauntered along and hit obstacles and roadblocks and turned around, and it just wandered over to the cheese and eventually got there, right? But the starved rat was in a frenzy to get there. So it was just frantic, and it got there a lot faster. But what was interesting is that then they did this experiment with those same two rats and put them back in the maze, but starved both of them this time. And the one that was actually fed, which is the fat rat from my story, the fat rat syndrome, basically the fat rat was the inspiration for it because it actually got to the cheese remarkably faster, and it missed all of the obstacles that it had hit the last time because it was not stressed when it went through the first time. So it paid attention to the signs, symbols, omens that it passed along its path, so that when it was time to be in a threatening situation, it got directly there, because it had had time to test out the grounds and get itself familiar and comfortable to be able to then do it when it was required. And for years, I've said, oh, wow, I have fat rat syndrome. And in that moment, while I was driving through the English countryside as a fully supported housewife that wasn't married, but lived in England with, two bonus kids and a dog and an ex, and that whole life that I had at that time, I was not fully standing in my power. My inner prostitute was in her scared side, because without him, what was I to do, right? And how many people are actually in a situation where they're dependent on their partner that way? And so I realized I was driving through the countryside, and it was like, oh, I have fat rat syndrome. So I'm fully fed. I'm kind of sauntering along. I'm figuring things out. I've spent thousands of dollars on trainings to know what I know. And I've went through what I've went through. And obviously my entire reality changed. I'm in Canada, not England. I'm not with that partner. And I have a completely different lifestyle. However, I have been in my grandparents' basement. So I have been, supporting them and being here, and they support me. And it's just like, well, grandma passed away last year and had a horrible demise because she was a prisoner in the hospital for the last 3 months of her life and didn't understand why her family wouldn't come in to see her for the last month of it. It was horrendous, And it's just like how we all have these stories. And we're being hit from the outside really hard. But what we have to see is how everything that we have been through leading up to this moment has all been preparing us for when the call came. We would be ready. The call has already been coming. Every moment is a call. That's what it means to be sacred. That means to really be in the sacred side of not just our archetypes, which are the familiar patterns we fill in with energy. It's about being able to call ourselves fully present and make space in the moment so that then we can actually intentionally fill that space, because it will be filled either way. So everything that happened before now, we can judge ourselves, or we can choose to let this moment be the moment that we give ourselves the forgiveness that we need. To say, if we were deceived, if others manipulated us, if we believed things to be other than they actually are, and we bought into a belief system that doesn't serve us, we have permission to change. We have permission to choose differently when we find out that it wasn't what we thought it was, and we don't have to judge ourselves or hate anyone else or blame anyone else. We don't have to step into the victim once we find out we've been deceived. We can just actually step over and choose to say, okay, that was the story for a while, and then I changed that. Because that's really what's required right now. So many people are in the victim position, and that's exactly where it's intended that we, the people, be. Because we're not as empowered when we're isolated, when we feel lesser than anyone else because of our status, because our changed identity, which has been forced on many who lost employment or lost opportunity because of their choices to remain organic. So if we're going to choose to advocate for ourselves and we're going to be paying for all of those choices, there are people that are paying for those choices, and it's directly impacting their identity and sense of self. And that's what's being attacked right now. And if we don't know how to consciously set that self-image, that identity that we have of ourselves, then we're going to have a lot of problems when everything on the outside is taken from us. And that's what many have talked about. Malcolm Gladwell comes to mind. Like his quote, I can't paraphrase it specifically, but it's about, being poorly equipped to inherit a world that no longer exists is what the ones with high status will be. Essentially, not his words, but the ones that I'm adapting, because that's what we really need to do, is change our status so that we stand. Because the sacred sojourn of the soul, and then the summons that my person got, and then the journey that I went on to go through that in the last year, all of that helped me understand that the public is where we status. You look at my status. Am I online? Am I offline? You look at my relationship status, which isn't listed because that's private. You look at my private medical status, and I don't share that because that's private as well. Because it's nobody's business unless it is their business. And if it is their business, then why is it their business? And how do I benefit them? By making the choice that I do to have a status that I do. When I get others involved, other entities involved in my relations, why do I do it? And who benefits? And whose business is it? And if it's their business, how am I profiting them? Because then I'm part of the consumer chain. And that's the thing we have to start looking at. We have to look at a much bigger picture than what we have been. And I wonder if anyone else has a contribution that you might want to offer at this point, because I don't want it to be just the Laura Show. I'm not hosting this specifically for me to be able to share what I have to say, but I do believe that it is time that we take God out of the box. The grand overall designer, the source, the creator, whatever it is. Take God out of the box. Let all of the mystery schools, traditions, all the BS of all of it, let that be good. And then let's take the best and put it on the table and then create something that's virtues-based. That's really what I was saying when I got deemed crazy and locked up for 2.5 weeks back in 2019 when I went through my awakening. And I don't wish that experience on anyone, because what I came to realize from it is that the Mental Health Act very quickly becomes the Health Act if we don't get ahead of the legislation, and also take the suits off of the men and women that are making the choices to uphold that legislation, so that then they're standing there as men and women on common ground to what we are, which is how we stand, not status. Status is what we do in the public. Stand is what we must do in the private. And even when we're in the public, Who is to say, what man or woman is to say that I was not a woman in my private capacity today when I was with other men and women who were also in their private capacity? Who is to say I was not in my private capacity? Because whoever that is, whatever man or woman is going to make that claim against me as the woman, can take the stand under oath and make that declaration. And I will use that in my counterclaim to the false claim that is being alleged against my person, if that is what the government tried to do, because that is the interface, just like this interface here. This Zoom is an interface for us to be able to connect. The person is the interface the government uses to engage with us as men and women. And so when we realize that that is a status, this is a standing, even though I'm sitting, it's the equivalent. I am present, present, as are you. And I appreciate you for that. So I had a little soapbox rant. Michael, do you have anything that you wanted to put in there? You're muted.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation to hear your perspective. And starting out is thinking about the fat rat syndrome. Certainly, I guess the first important thing is we have a good breakfast.
Break the fast.
And there we are. Maybe there's a vote for good breakfast programs too, because when you're fed and you're functioning well, then you're going to get more out of life, and you're going to be able to put more into it. Precisely. So I think that's a really important thing. And in terms of a maze and a challenge, that's certainly something that people are experiencing right now.
Yes.
Because it's not a straight road. There's lots of roadblocks that people have been experiencing. So all of a sudden things change in their job, change with their family relations, change in terms of what they're able to do. And they may be in one group or another, but even those things aren't staying the same. So we see those challenges, and then people have to come up with ways to cope with them. And a lot of it has to do with fear and trying to do what's right when you don't necessarily have all the facts, and then the information that's presented to you doesn't always make sense. And I think it's important to look at the world and ask yourself, okay, what makes sense and what only sounds like it makes sense? Because the people that may be trying to profit will tell you the things that sound like they make sense, but somehow we know what does and doesn't. And it can be a difficult time when a lot of things don't quite make sense.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to know what does make sense?
Please tell me.
The fact that I picked up Life is a Special Event today from Carol Maxim, and I'm going to be reading this book, and it's going to be about bringing the sacred back. It's going to be about realizing the sacredness of the moment. And Carol is actually a member of the Shambhala Temple of Light. So I connected with her because I had to drop off a package about the sacred adventure that Summit Lighthouse University has that I had borrowed from Michael. And so I have the copies of it and then needed to return that. And I didn't message him until literally I was on my way home, and the woman that lives on Queen Street happened to be the place where I had to deliver the sacred adventure. And I had Jesus and Saint Germain pictures of them that I was returning to Michael. And so those were in the back seat, and those came to Toronto with me last night and were in the back of my car during the rally. And so all of these things are significant in my perspective, or from my perspective, because if you weren't aware, on January 29th, I'm actually going to be going to Queen's Park at 2 o'clock, if anyone would like to attend also. And I would invite all who choose to be in Queen's Park on January 29th between 2 and 4 time to be able to actually dress up as kings and queens, because I believe that we need to be seen as the ones that we wish to become. And so I think that we should just start having some funs and having some masquerades, because people are being asked to wear a mask for their everyday now. So why not dress up in a whole costume and then act the part, right? And let us make it the act of a lifetime, because that is ultimately what Shakespeare said. This is a stage and we are all but actors, are we not?
Well, players.
Thank you. Speak more into that, Riel.
What's that?
Speak more into being a player of the game. What does it mean to play the game fully?
I believe Shakespeare said we're all players.
Did he seriously?
Am I the only one with the intermittent audio, or is everybody having that?
My audio has been fine the whole time, but I've been speaking, so I don't know.
I believe I've heard everything.
Overloading the audio channel? I don't know. I just, sometimes my audio breaks up, so I'm not sure if I'm getting everything or if I'm getting everything I'm saying.
You know what is interesting to actually speak into at that point, Riel, is about spiritual interference, energetic interference that comes when there is an up-leveling, which is also akin to this whole psyop that's been going on and the fear that's been implanted around general upgrades, because that's what illness is or can be. When we actually go through a cellular vibrational shift or upgrade, it's like when a rocket ship takes off. It's very unpleasant going through the liftoff phase, and then it's up and wow, pow, blast off, right? But the blast off phase is really shitty, pardon my language. And ultimately, it's befitting, because what we're dealing with right now is exactly that. But what we're dealing with is not just the shitty part of it. It's actually the blast off phase. So we can look at it like it's the manure that is hitting the fan right now, or we can look at it like it's actually the manure that is meant to harvest and fertilize what will be the harvest, because we choose to be who we see ourselves to be, which is why it's the Kings and Queens Assembly in Queen's Park on the 29th at 2 o'clock, if anyone is able to come. I just feel like I want to dress up like a queen, and I want to be a queen. And that means being seen as who I am, and to realize that through the sacred sojourn of the soul, what I learned is that I am most powerful when I stand as who I always was, which is as a woman in my private capacity, with all common law rights reserved, because common law is not English common law or King's common law or natural law, which is all a form of legalese from what I understand. And if I am incorrect, please, by all means, counter me on it, and let's have a conversation so that we can correct our understandings, because those understandings lead to our jurisdictions, which is because we are the ones that have a lawful right to self-govern ourselves, which means we have to have our own jurisdiction over the temple that is us. And that means we need to understand our definitions. We need to understand that we, by law, need to have our own code of conduct. This is why it's creating the round table that is virtues-based, so that we can actually get back to those virtues and live a life based on that, which kind of goes back to, what does it mean to be a player? What does it mean to be fully in? Fully Committed is the book title that came to me like 4 years ago when I started writing the book that rewrote me before the world gets to see the version this me will write. But like this me has now been like 10 months. Well, April 10th was when I spoke at that rally that my person then got a summons for 2.5 weeks later from. And then I've been learning about law ever since. And I was kind of learning about it after my mental health experience when I got locked up and learned that the Mental Health Act is the modern day witch hunt, legalized and normalized. And somebody even today at the rally in conversation said about how it wasn't that long ago that a man could literally have his wife sectioned, locked away because she was an uppity woman. Are you effing kidding me? Like, I would be deemed an uppity woman. I already am, because I'm outspoken and I'm hard to control, but a willful woman is, and so is a willful man, which is why the men have been used as the pawns on the playing field of the warship that are sent to the front lines to be destroyed and to destroy others, which destroys the soul. And then they come back broken and try to figure it out and do their best to forget and suppress, which is denial, which is guilt laden, which creates gaps. And then it puts us back further energetically and evolutionarily, if that's even a word. But if we go back, that, you know what I mean? Like if we look at it from the bigger picture, the men are put at the front of the lines to get rid of if they can. Right now, we've got concentration camps for elders that we pay thousands of dollars monthly in order to house them in. And it's just normalized, naturalized. Somebody was saying today that a 9-year-old woman was saying that she's literally a prisoner and she can't even go anywhere and she can't have people come in. Could you imagine? I have an 88-year-old man that I live with, and like, we love each other, and that keeps him healthier than what any doctor would be able to do. And this is what we need to remember about community and common unity. My cat just comes in. You know, when I moved in here, I was paying rent before, and my cat was there with me. And then when I was here, my cat was there. And then when I was there with him, my grandparents were here, and I just wanted to get my 3 favorites under the same roof. And that's what I did. And now when I go, they're all together. And then when I'm back, I'm with all of the 3 and now 2 that I love. You know, that's ideal. Like, I actually had it made, even though I judged myself the whole way through it. Up until I stopped judging myself for it and just said, like, I love where I am at right now. And I'm so grateful. And to whomever much is given, much is required. So I let the book become the big part of my identity. I became the one that was writing the book, and then the book became the project that everything relied on. And what ties back to a trail I got off of and went down a different rabbit hole earlier, I lost again. And this is how it's done. It's the weaving. We're going down the rabbit trails, and I don't know where I was. So I'm curious what someone else wants to contribute, because generally speaking, that's how conscious conversation happens.
I'll contribute.
Please.
I think the scenario you are living right now with your grandparents is what we're headed back to, because the ability to, you know, quote, stuff our grandparents into a home typically only exists with an affluent society. When I worked in China, they couldn't believe that, you know, we didn't have at least 3 generations living in the same house in North America. Well, who raises the grandkids? Like, who's raising your kids while you're at work? Oh, daycare. Well, who looks after the grandkids for the grandparents when you're too busy and the grandkids are gone or something? Well, we put them into a senior's home. Senior's home? Right? So and before World War II, I think if you look back into anybody's ancestry, there very far and few were any seniors' homes, right? Everybody lived together. And arguably, with, you know, the way things are changing now, that's likely coming together again. Whether it's the high cost of housing or how many families are broken, right? And that brings opportunities and challenges and beautiful moments with it, just like everything else.
Yeah, generational community is what.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, that's the one big thing I think I mentioned last time, is how important community is going forward, right? And not looking to the same old institutions or authorities or the way ahead, the direction or permission, and, you know, all of those things. It's kind of taking the bull by the horns yourself and seeing what makes sense in the present moment for your community, not some centralized authority, some other part of the country telling you you have to do this or you have to do that, otherwise you're second class.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen says, if you want to change the world, you first must change yourself. And then it's minus 40 up in Sudbury with the wind right now. Oh my goodness.
Ooh.
And Stephen, who's actually over in Scotland, he says, we're always supported by the universe every step of the way. Live in self-sovereignty and faith in divine intellect, and all will resonate with your frequency. And that's one of the things we have to, I was having a conversation with some of the other people that were at the event today. And it's like, when we speak, we have to understand how our nervous system actually triggers others' nervous systems. And then that's where truth is resonant. So we feel truth. That's why they needed to make it a mental health crisis, to move us into our heads so we weren't in our hearts. Because when we're in our hearts, that's when our intuition is able to come up from the will and also merge with awareness in order to be able to feel truth. And that's where our emotions show up, as well as our states of being, which are connected to the high rise of emotional awareness theory that I created and will be guiding people through this month as we really go deeper into the special practice from a practical perspective. Resonance is, truth is resonant. And when we actually merge the awareness with the will to be able to feel truth and get back in the moment, that's where our power is, because then we're present. And actually in the game of quantum syntax grammar, this book was really fantastic. I read the last chapters, which are actually, it talks about the story of, or the box of regrets, and how this gentleman, there's a story that he tells about how we have these box of regrets that we go back to, and we let the child within us make our decisions because they created a map of the world based on feeling safe. And then this book, actually also by C.Anne de Rohan, Feelings Matter, Keys to the Unexplored Self. This book also talks about basically you have the reptilian mind, the mammalian mind, and then the neocortex, which is the human rational thinking mind, so the conscious mind. And basically, if you're in the human mind, the conscious mind, the rational mind, that's the part of us that can actually discern information. So once we feel the truth, then we can actually process it. But when we're in the instinctual mind, that's the fight, flight, freeze, fawn experience. And that's when our nervous system is triggered, which goes back to then speaking. And I was saying to the other speakers that when our nervous system is triggered, when we are escalated at a higher level of emotion where we're not making ourselves safe, the information that we transfer is not safe because it's charged with the same energetic vibration that our sharing of it was, which is why we have to be so careful, full of care with how we're actually showing up and how we're delivering information, especially because the truth is not pretty. And because there is so much disinformation and misinformation that we have been fed for just to even throw off the truth. So, you know, how do you discern the truth if you're not connected in your heart, which is the resonant field, right? So if we actually get back into the present moment and into the heart, that's when then we are able to create that inner rabbit hole that we can enter into, the Maxwell Maltz wrote about, which is basically the sense of home that we can bring with us anywhere we go, so that wherever we are, we can access that kingdom within. Because if we access it now by creating it ahead of time, where we're safe, nothing is threatening us right now in this moment. We're making the time to be here. And when you watch back, you're making the time, you've made the space. Will is space. So you've willed away with the space that you've created to be present. So now you fill that present moment with your desires, the things of birth that you wish to give birth to. So you created in your mind ahead of time this rabbit hole, this inner sense of home, that then you bring yourself back into the moment in order to be in that sacred space. And when you create that ahead of time, then you have that memory cellularly to access when you're in a chaotic state. So then it's like, okay, find your center. Okay. And then you can make a decision, because now you've just filled your neocortex mind with blood, so it can actually think. Before that, it's just like fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? So when we actually think about it from a resonance perspective, and when we think about it from a fear perspective, and we think about it from an energetic perspective of transference and resonance, that's when we realize that when we're triggered and escalated, we trigger that in others. It's part of our energetic signature, which is embodiment of a new energetic signature, is the part before contribution in the sacred sojourn of the soul. We actually have to change our own vibrational signature so that we're aware consciously that when we are speaking or communicating or sharing the truth or sharing our truth, whatever it is that we're doing in the moment, we have to understand how we are impacting others, because there are a lot of people that do understand how to manipulate people, which is what it means to be conscious of what we're playing with. Then we can mold the clay how we wish it to be. Otherwise, we get to be the clay that is being molded by someone else who better understands communication. And so if we're allowing ourselves to be putty in the hands of a good salesman, be careful, because if it's their business and it's your business, how's that going to benefit you, and how's that going to benefit them? And how's that going to benefit the corpse they are generally working for? Because that corpse isn't going to pay if you suffer from what they sold you, but they're going to pay karmically. And this is the thing that we need to be having the conversation of around too. The fact that the ones who are participating in the corruption and going against their better judgment will pass a final day of evaluation at the end of this incarnation. And when that happens, they can't claim color of right like they could in the court of law. Color of right is plausible deniability, which basically means, oh, I didn't think that I was wrong. Like, I thought that was right, so I was doing what I thought was right, which is what a lot of those who are virtue signaling are doing, to try to shame others into conforming also. Because if they can virtue signal and use all of the signs of the death cult in order to show their allegiance to society and making things better and getting back to normal, which doesn't exist and won't ever come back the way that it was before. It's the old normal doesn't exist. The new normal is not what they are going to prescribe for us, because we need to understand that they are us too, because it is men and women wearing suits, acting in the positions of government and all the other things that are corpses, entities that we give our life to and then also sign on behalf of, which means we actually become half of the corpse that we work for. And once we're behalf of the corpse, then we assume liability, because if the entity, the corpse, has to pay blood, it can't draw it from a stone, so it will draw it from the flesh and blood that signs on behalf of the stone. And these are the things that the people need to really understand about resonance and getting back in the heart, because this is very heavy. And the truth is very heavy in some ways. But if we can shift our energy and learn to move with the moment, then we don't get it lodged and stuck. Because once we're in fear, we contract, we constrict, we put God in a box, which means we are in a box. Grand overall designer, yeah, you're the creator of your own life, the co-creator. You've got assistance, it's divine. But you're fully supported. We are all fully supported if we call. If we ask for assistance, if we create it ahead of time, it will come. But we also have to understand the universe doesn't differentiate negatives. The universe just gives us back more of that which we focus on. So if we're putting out fear, false emotion or evidence appearing real in the moment, if we're fearful and put that thought out, and worry is like a rocking chair that takes a lot of effort that gets us nowhere. If we're worried, that's a lower state of emotion that is not in the moment, because we're either in the future, which is anxiety, which is actually, this book says that as well. But if we're in the future, we're in anxiety. And if we're in regret, we're in the past. So we're not present now. And in the game of quantum syntax grammar, the only moment in the court of now is now. And I say that we make the court of now the new orderly world, or the newly ordered world, because we're doing it. But this is what we must do ahead of time, like by coming into meetings like this, by watching back and saying, I want to be in the next one, Monday at 8 Eastern. Nice little plug. Years ago, I did a self-image. I did a self-image series, and one of the episodes I actually talked about our self-image is like or our self-esteem is actually like a boat with a whole bunch of holes. Looks really good on the shore. Tried to take that baby out, and it's got holes in it, and you don't know that baby's got holes in it. Oh my gosh, that reminds me of a story about there was a man that took his boat to go get painted. And while the man was doing the job, he ended up finding a hole in the boat. And so he patched it out. He patched it up without saying anything, and he painted over it, and it looked great, but it actually worked. And it kept the water out and kept the boat afloat. And so anyway, he was working, and that was business, but he was a man that had integrity and did his job to the best of his ability. And so when he saw the hole, he thought nothing of patching it up, because it was a small price for him to do in terms of time, energy, effort, attention, and money, which is our team. It took a little bit of his team, but ultimately the man was going to have to do it anyway, and it was going to mess up his paint job. So it would need to happen. So he did it. But the man actually that received the boat back came and delivered the money for that service the next day and paid way more than the man had asked. Because what had happened when he delivered the boat back, the boat got put in the water, and however it went, his son decided to take that boat on a joyride with a friend. And they made it safely because that hole was patched. But they had no idea there had been a hole there. And if the painter had have overlooked the hole that the man had forgot to mention when he dropped his boat off, had he not done the best that he could, that man's son and friend would have drowned, because the boat would have been unsafe, because the man that repaired and just did a paint job would have let the hole be there, and then the boys would have drowned, and it would have cost the man with the boat all of that, because our people are where our heart is. So that was a spontaneous story that I offer, because I do believe it is time for us to do our best. I've got more comments, unless either of you have things you want to say. Stephen is saying no better food than soul food. Everything sounds fine, even from Riel. I love it. I hope I can make it on the 29th. Jonathan is Mercury saying there's a recent movie about this. I Care a Lot. Watch that movie. So the movie is called I Care a Lot. And he shared the trailer for it over on my Facebook page, which is under my same Laura J.E. Hamilton name. And that's why we need to heal trauma, so we don't carry negative energetic emotion into the present moment, Stephen says. Gratitude, love, unity, and acceptance is the doorway to willful creation. Yeah, full of will. Where there's a will, there's a way. This is literally a direct attack on our will, which is the feminine principle within us. Our will is the feminine, the masculine is awareness, and then the heart is the child of the two that actually need to communicate in order for us to be able to do what we're here for. So it's been, pardon?
I would call it, for our current time, it's a bit of the ultimate soul test. Right?
It's the ultimate
soul test.
Soul test. Oh, yes, absolutely. Spot
right?
on.
Like the repercussions of not following your own knowing of your soul will be far reaching.
Amen.
And usually in the past, it wasn't, for our generation, like, the last 50, 60, 70 years, things were pretty lax in that respect. But now your decisions can have big impact. And, I'm speaking specifically to the jabbing and all that stuff that's going on.
Yes. Well, I heard years ago about, if we think about, okay, so this is kind of a bit of a stretch, but not really. If we think about all time is happening now, then we see that time is like a multi-dimensional layer cake. And so future aspects of us are looking back at now, in the now, because that's where they are to where they are. And then the past is now or was then, because it's all now, the game of quantum syntax grammar, right? But I heard that there were versions of beings observing observing humans on Earth very carefully for the choices that we make now. Because if we actually think about it, I think in terms of reincarnation, because we live in a university, indeed it is. But we live in a universe of cause and effect. And we also live in a universe of continuous recycling. So energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only displaced, moved, transformed, transmuted. So if our soul is recycled, and if we think about the sacred texts, whatever one that you're familiar with, those sacred texts always talk about the great ones and who they were before now. But have you ever thought about who you were? Likely, maybe. We've all kind of thought, like wondered, but like we don't know, right? And it's just like, when you ask, so it's funny because I remember somebody saying about how they had held a special event. Life is a special event. We're going to be reading that and then going over that with Carol. She's going to join us. But basically, they hosted a special event where they invited everyone to come as the character they were in a previous life. And guess what everyone showed up as? Kings and queens. Of course, right? Everybody was an important character in the life before, There were a few Cleopatras and a few, Mark Anthony's and Napoleons, and, there were a few, like Hitler's, nobody's going to dress up as Hitler, but, pardon? Well, maybe now, I don't know.
Figures?
No what?
No ditch diggers?
No ditch diggers? Yeah, right? Yeah, nobody did the grave digger that, like, had to listen for the bell for, like, anybody that came back into their body and, like, had, like, the string and bell on their toe in case it moved, then people would know, like, they were still alive, like, dig them up, like, they're still with us, right?
But Saved by the Bell.
Yeah, Saved by the Bell, literally. Yeah, because otherwise you'd suffocate in the grave that was dug for you because they didn't realize you were still alive, and, like, crazy stuff. But anyway, the whole aspect of, if it's all happening now, and if, like, we were all of those things before, what could we be next? And if we're thinking about that next, and if we want to get into the me and mine and selfishness, which is culturally part of, like, the narcissistic culture that's really we've been conditioned into over the last however many decades, but particularly the last few. Basically, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Sorry.
We were talking about reincarnation and kings and queens.
Everybody chooses to be an important.
And then looking at what we were in the past, but what could we be in the future?
Yes. And then the ones that are watching us now, if we're going to get into a selfish perspective, which is the narcissistic culture that distracted me, if we want to get selfish about this, if you don't care about anybody else who is watching this, if you do not care about the fate of anybody else, I would encourage you to consider your own fate if reincarnation is real. And if you are going to come back, and if you don't give a damn about anyone else, well, I would ask you some questions around that, but we'll leave that for now. My point is that if you don't care about anyone else, and you say, whatever, what if you come back in the reality that you create because you did nothing? What if you come back into the reality that you create because you did something? Which one are you going to prefer then? And you think however long you've been alive has been difficult this time? Imagine coming back in the reality that you create based on your choices now. So if we were to get really selfish, right now, we really need to be making responsible choices we're able to respond to. Because if we don't, a future incarnation of us is going to pay for that price. And that's a consequence most people are not talking about. If you want to pass the test, be compassionate without attachment. Yeah.
A lot of people don't think about next year.
A lot of people don't.
Think about next year, much less the next lifetime.
What people don't think about makes fear.
Well, I said most people don't think about what's going to happen even next year.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's
Much
the
less,
point.
much less, any future lives.
Yeah.
I know when I was introduced to that concept by a quantum physicist turned Zen monk, and he made a big discussion about future lives that never, entered my train of thought until he did.
Right.
And it certainly affected the way that I looked at things.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't even believe in reincarnation. I mean, it's a I would call it a spiritual crisis, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we
and
absolutely
that's one of the many benefits of COVID is everybody has to get off the couch and get involved, and there will be growth one way or another.
Yeah. Well, I think today...
Spiritual growth, I would call it.
Pardon?
I would call it spiritual growth, right?
Yes. Which is why today has been the first Kingdom Within podcast episode with fellow travelers with great things to say and contribute. And so I appreciate each of you for showing up. I appreciate each of you who are tuning in on Facebook or YouTube in this moment that we're in right now, that we're recording this, or in the future now moment that you are living where you're sharing the experience that we had now. Then we thank you and celebrate you. And on my way home, I recorded some videos while I was driving, as I often do, and I recorded some videos from the experiences I had today, which were just sequentially bang, 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 meeting players that needed to be connected with. So please, in that video, I said, please like your own comments first. Please like your own pictures or your own posts or your own videos first. Please like yourself first. That was one of the messages I recorded on the way home, because if you like yourself first, you might like us more. But if you think you're really crap, how are you possibly not going to smear crap on us? Like, what's in comes back to us. Like, what is impressed gets expressed. So if you're feeling really bad about yourself on the inside, you're going to pop that out and create a reality that is nightmarish for you and the others that get sucked into your vortex, because you are a creator that is creating worlds. And so I wonder what world you are willing to create. And if you would like to create a royal one, well, let us gather together on the 12th, actually, on Wednesday. Jared Wade with Mad Hatter Music and I are co-hosting the Mental Health Summit. You're welcome to come. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be going beyond mental health to actually talk about emotional health as well, which contributes to mental health, physical health, spiritual health. We're going to carry on this conversation on Wednesday, so I would invite you to come out then as well. I appreciate you for showing up this evening, for each of you in view, and then all others who tune into the replay and say, I want to be there live. Go to meetup.com. Peaceful Inner Warriors United is where I post the events that I will be attending, and dare to say anyone else who happens to be in the area that day is welcome to also play and say a few things in person to the other men and women that come to be ourselves fully, even though sometimes we like to dress up and play, knowing who we were underneath of those acts, those suits rather, because it's not the act until we give it our power and then allow the men and women wearing suits to turn it into a play that is not in our best interest, even the ones that are making the decisions. So let us instead say, let's shift that. So that's what Jared and Wade and I are actually doing with the Album 22.2 project, you're also welcome to. We have a monthly meeting on the 22nd. This one is at noon that day, so you'd be welcome to attend that too. And then, as I did mention, the Kings and Queens Assembly, it would be nice to see who else wants to be their best version of themselves. And so we will be just happening to be at Queen's Park that day between 2 and 4 if you want to play. And that is all we've got for this first Monday night podcast. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Peace out, everyone. I'm going to turn it off over on online, and then we can have a conversation, which is a benefit for getting yourself in the room. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great day, everyone who is tuning in, and we will see you again next Monday, 8 p.m. Thank you.
Good night.
Yay! Go!